Let me ask you a question. What happens when you balance your finances, career, and your well-being? There's no limit to what you can achieve. I'm Jalen Vickery, your host and guide on how to build wealth with wellness. Living in a world of information overload and misleading highlight reels, Finance, Fitness, Finesse is a podcast to help you realize you're not woke, you're broke, and how to change that in your favor. If you're looking to elevate your wealth, well-being, and discover the power of balance, tune in to learn why money matters, but wellness counts.
Joy is something that can be very consistent. We all have three main intelligences in ourselves.
What's up, Finessers? Welcome to another episode of Finance, Fitness, and Finesse, where we build your wealth with wellness. I'm your host, JaeVic, and thank you for joining me for The Savvy Scholar, where industry experts share their insights on building wealth, managing stress, and living a balanced life. Before we get started, help your girl out and your lifelong learner community grow, and leave a rate and review for the show on the homepage. Today's guest is dedicated to guiding individuals towards a joyfully abundant life by helping them discover their authentic selves and embrace personal fulfillment. In this episode of F3, I had the chance to sit down with the Joyologist. You heard that right, Joyology. This is Heidi Esther, a professional life coach, speaker, and author of the book For Cryin Out Loud. Heidi brings a wealth of experience and insight into the journey of self-exploration and the pursuit of joy, which is what we're all after at the end of the day. We're going to dive into topics about your emotional IQ, transforming personal challenges into strengths, the importance of genuine connection, overcoming the burden and debt of people-pleasing, and embracing one's unique, peculiar genius. From redefining happiness on your own terms to finding practical ways to step into a more joyful and authentic life, Heidi is here with us to show us how embracing who you truly are can lead to extraordinary results. You ready? All right, let's get into it. What was your first money memory, or your first memory when your relationship with money changed?
That is such a good question. Thank you for that. So as a child of the 80s, I rode my bike a lot of places. And as a girl child in the 80s, as a preteen, my designated working position was babysitter. So I would save up my $5 bills, and every 3 or 4 weeks at my local bookstore, they would drop a new edition of Babysitter's Club. It goes way, way back. I mean, it was kind of like a toss-up sometimes between Sweet Valley Twins and Babysitter's Club. But I really liked the Babysitter's Club because that was my first, outside of my parents, who I never felt without. I never felt without growing up, but there wasn't a ton of extras. There wasn't anything extra. My first real money memory is saving up in my tiny little, I think my mom, she sewed me a little coin purse, and I would fold up my $5 bills really neatly, because sometimes it was just over $10 for it, and if it was a big one. And I'd go there and I'd proudly hand them my two $5 bills, and then fold up the ones and put them back in my coin purse and my little
That's so sweet.
backpack. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So just saving all of the money that I spent. Right. So I had a babysitting job from when I was 10 to when I was 20. And so almost all of that money went straight into education. My parents are both teachers. And so it was there's this tie. I have this very strong tie to how to invest the money. And money needs to be invested in yourself or your future. And so right now it's always hard for me to say, oh my God, I want to go to that retreat. And then I automatically go boom, what are going to be my takeaways? How am I going to improve myself going forward with this? So I tend to be really tight in some places so that I can have this long-term relationship with using money for development. But there's lots of other stuff in there too we can get into later.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I love to hear how you have been able to draw some of the connections from those very early memories and figuring out how to tie in things you're interested in into it being an investment for yourself, not just, oh, I did a job, I get the money, I spend it. There's a lot of other things within that that fuel curiosity, especially in regards to investing in yourself, which is just one of the fundamentals of life and of this podcast. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And Heidi, I would love if you could just tell our audience a little bit about your background. So, just so the audience knows, I met Heidi. She was a keynote speaker at a innovators conference that I went to. And not only was my attention and energy caught by the energy Heidi was radiating from the front speaking to us, but she's also a joyologist, which I feel like I don't hear about this enough in my life because a lot of people struggle with joy. So can you tell us a little bit about, joyology and like what brought you here?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that question. So I have a big heart for community. I started with like a 17-year career just in the nonprofit sector and in fundraising and community building and doing events and major gifts and all that stuff. And I was a mom during that time. And I went through what I like to call my decade in life's fun house. And so it was like one life challenge after another. And I was just brought up with that mentality, right? Just be of service, be of help where you're at. And so I kept plugging back into like, what nonprofit needs my help and how can I partner? And my personal challenges, which were like divorce and depression and some unemployment, they all just kind of knocking me down and knocking me down during this decade. And I kept just trying to come back and being like, it wasn't necessarily joy. There are moments of joy, but there wasn't like, oh my God, I'm going to pursue joy. It was just like, how can I feel better than now? Now I feel like the bottom of my shoe. Like, how can I scrape myself off the floor and feel better? So I got to the end of like this decade and it was May of 2020. So the first shutdown, we weren't sure if toilet paper was ever going to come back in stock in the store. People were really freaking out about everything. And I was recently unemployed and I was at home and my kids were miserable and they were on like virtual schooling, but not really. And my wife was miserable at the time. And I just was able to find a way to like have the best day every day. And it was just completely like I was on Mars. And I was like, how did this, I don't know how this happened, but like, I love it here. I know it's a pandemic. I know most people are in freak out, but like, I can take that and I can say, okay, I got this big ball of stress. My uncle passed away early in the pandemic. It was very sad and we couldn't get together. Right. So I was holding this grief and I was holding this pandemic and everyone around me is miserable. And yet I was able to find joy. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then soon after that, I got this like a spiritual awakening or a call every night for 7 nights in a row. I would get up at 2:30 in the morning and be like, oh, I'm having a great day. Let's go do something. This is so fun. And then I'd be like, what time is it? I need to go back to bed. This is not normal. And then finally, and I would bargain. I would say, I'm grateful to feel this wonderful. And I would bargain with like the universe, God, higher power, everybody in my spiritual zone. I was like, what do you want of me, universe? And then finally, on the 7th day, yeah, total biblical reference there, I guess, I got up and wrote my story. I just started writing out how I got there. So I wrote notebooks and notebooks that summer, which turned into a blog and then a book and then some speaking and coaching. And really behind all of that is this desire to help people, overworked, frustrated, busy, generous, hardworking souls. We deserve joy and there's a way to get to it. And I have a strategic brain. And so I help them create their formula for joy. So thus the name Joyologist. I help people with their joyology.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm wondering if you can break down for us a bit how intentional we have to be with our joy. Because I'm sure it's kind of like a muscle, like we'd have to work it into a habit so it comes natural. We honestly all need our memoirs from 2020. Everyone should, be able to have a voice on how that experience impacted them, because I know for me, I was actually coming off of some really severe mental health challenges. My first season of softball, the Big Ten ended suddenly. My car got totaled by my ex-boyfriend the day I found out our season was ending. Everyone, don't let your significant others, especially if you're young, be driving down to Walgreens with your car just for a 2-minute drive. Anyways, I digress. Miss Gertie, that was the name of the car. She was all punker.
Ah,
I upgraded to
R.I.P.
my
to the,
Mustang.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
very nice. But R.I.P. to beautiful Miss Gertie.
Yes, RIP.
Very.
But anyways, how intentional do we have to be with our joy?
Thank you for your question. A lot of people confuse joy and happiness, right? Happiness is like you get the package from Amazon, right? You get this fleeting experience. Joy is something that can be very consistent. When we go trying to seek it, a lot of times we end up in happiness. And so this is what I will share. And this is going to sound really random, but we all have three main intelligences in ourselves. We have our mental intelligence. We get curated so well in school, right? School does the big mental intelligence. And then we have the heart intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence. So curating that. And also we have the intelligence of the body. And not a lot of people know this. So we all have this capability of all three. So when we end up using just like one of them or leaning on one, even if we like have a gut sense, we're like, no, we have to arrive at this only logically. It's kind of like we can't fight a fair fight with our hands behind our back. We need all three. We need the brain and the emotional intelligence and the gut to really be able to move forward. And when I first talk with people, and if they're in states of like burnout, overwork, stress, right? Financial stress is a big one, but just some kind of like, I don't know what to do with my life and nothing is working. I call it following the white rabbit. Just being able to say, like, where is my energy going? Where is my curiosity going? Where is my body telling me? What is my body telling me? Is it telling me like it's a scary edge, but I want to do it? Kind of like, ooh, gonna go on a roller coaster ride. What is my heart telling me? How do I feel about this? A lot of people only, for better or worse, I would say worse, they make decisions based on how they feel. We all have one intelligence that's like right at the top. And we need all three to make our most informed, most joyful decisions. And to be able to get to follow that joy, we need to be listening to this energy that's coming from all these sources and not just blindfolding ourselves when we are in these states, right? And maybe we can't even feel, I can't even feel curious about anything because I'm so exhausted. And that's why I say, like, we start at the baby start. We start with awareness. We start with being compassionate. I call it the compassionate co-pilot to ourselves. So what emotional intelligence can give us for our mental intelligence and our body is that self-awareness. So I think that's one of the best benefits of emotional intelligence is just becoming more self-aware. Once we get that, we can say like, all right, self-aware, we're going to pretend that we're driving a car and the person driving a car is the person experiencing life, right? So all that body intelligence, getting all that body intelligence, reading all the books, getting all that knowledge. But the emotional intelligence piece a lot of it comes from the awareness, what I call the co-pilot. So saying like, oh, how do we feel about this? Or, oh, what did we learn about this? Or like, oh, what is our body telling us? Really getting that compassion in there. So you got to start with where you're at. Emotions are on a scale from like hopelessness and depression all the way up to joy and gratitude. You can't jump. It's like a big ladder. You can't jump rungs. You got to go one at a time. So you got to go by like all sorts of rage and anger and like boredom and annoyance to get all the way up to the positive ones like hopefulness, optimism, gratitude, joy. So you got to go one at a time. And so just developing that compassion to say like, it's going to be a journey and I'm going to be here with myself the whole time and not punching myself in the gut every time that things don't go right.
Amen to that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I recently, actually, I had another interview this week with Joy Slayball, And she was talking about some similar concepts in regards to especially emotional intelligence, about how there's not really such thing as a good or bad thought. You just have both thoughts that may be conflicting because they're there to help you in different ways. Just like what you're saying, it's like the body, mind, soul connection, but you're taking it a step further of the three different types of intelligence within those realms. It sounds like to me, if I'm understanding it correctly, happiness, it's a state. It lasts at different durations. Like I could go and eat something really good and that could just make me happy for the time I'm eating it because of the dopamine, serotonin that's going off. But in order to have authentic joy, we have to go through and embrace or accept the discomfort of new experiences, self exploration. And I was going to ask you about that self awareness piece. I feel like it's one of the superpowers that we can work to obtain as, a human being. But self-awareness doesn't always bring about the good. It brings about the things you're also challenged by.
Yeah. I read a statistic recently. I think it hasn't changed over the years, but about 90% of people believe they are self-aware. About 15% of people are.
Ooh,
Yeah. That's a doozy whopper.
wow.
That's what goes in my doozy whopper column. And so,
Doozy Whopper.
yeah, I'm bringing it back from my parents. Yeah. So just being able to, with these intelligences, just sit in the places. And that is part of what I do in my life coaching, is just sit in the places that we're at. And the really hard thing for people is we're not taught to accept it. A lot of times people talk about, like, oh, we live in a toxically positive world. We're trying to just constantly reframe and constantly, it'll be fine. You know what? Sometimes it ain't fine. It's not fine. So to get that emotional intelligence, to understand what's going on with us, we have to expand that discomfort zone and just sit in there so that we understand, we can accept the emotion. I call it eating the feelings parfait, because our feelings come in like different layers. They're not just, I feel sad, but we might feel conflicted, we might be angry, we might feel a little bit guilty, we might feel like lack of motivation, we might feel like we were triggered, or we felt lonely or something. So once we accept everything that is coming in, our body is telling us, right? Then we get that gift, that golden nugget of self-awareness and understanding of ourselves. And then we can integrate it, be like, oh my God, my body was telling me this. And that's why, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Now I know to not do it over there with, I'm not going to do that partnership, but I'm going to go over here and try this. Just like integrating everything and accepting. I think acceptance is such a huge piece. We all want to get to the end, and acceptance is kind of like the messy middle. It's like accepting all of that messy middle piece so that we can become more resilient and move forward again, versus like trying to drag or gag all of our feelings along with us. We're carrying this huge emotional weight, which causes ripples in our brain and causes mental drag. It causes physical challenges. A lot of people come to me. I had a woman recently, and she said she was stretched thin and she had chronic pain. And I'm not a massage therapist. And we went through a bunch of activities that involve self-awareness and engaging her inner worthiness, and then building that resilience to come back and come back. And then she became braver and more empowered. And by the end of, I think it was, worked with her for like 3 months, she didn't have chronic pain anymore. I didn't lay a hand on her. And so it's just like, these things are huge. They're so interconnected. That's why it's so important that you're here sharing the message that you have to share, because everything is so incredibly connected. One of the sleeper categories in emotional intelligence is self-motivation. So there's self-awareness and self-motivation. A lot of times we are taught to use our brains to like just be negative, say like, you better do this, or if you don't do this, I'm dumb, or I'm stupid, or I'm lazy. And so working with self-motivation in terms of building our resilience muscle. So we develop self-awareness, and that's always the first big piece in emotional intelligence, because it helps all the intelligences come out to play in a safer, more friendly environment. And then we end up building our resilience and coming back to ourselves and saying, all right, I'm going to engage my little white rabbit inside and say, like, I wonder if this way will work. I wonder if this way will work. And right. So learning to engage our self motivation and try different things and be okay with the discomfort and waiting for what is the answer. A lot of times, emotional intelligence, it's quiet, it speaks quietly. Our emotions sometimes are not loud. Sometimes they are, and then they're big warnings and they're right there. But most of the times, they're pretty quiet.
I feel like when they're loud is when you've reached the point where it's like a little too far, where that's where it's really hard to gain control or really just ground yourself. It's almost like you're just reaching those bursting points. I'm wondering a few things based on what you're saying, because when I think about the default of where we are just at as a society, as a population, is to keep hustling. I understand that it's okay not to be okay is fine now since mental health is becoming more accepted, but it's still like, no, I have to keep hustling. I have to keep working. I have to keep doing this. I need to just put this on the shelf for now. And then I'll come back when your emotions are screaming at you rather than all those little fleeting thoughts that you could have taken a second to address. Okay, why am I feeling this way? It's very difficult, I find. It was difficult for me at first, being like, wait, I need to really sit in these emotions and understand what's going on. It's almost like we don't think we have time for it. So that's why we have to cut out time with a therapist or like a lifestyle consultant to be like, I have to pencil this in because I won't do it for myself. And I'm totally with you on that self motivation. But one thing that I try to flip the script on is saying that we need momentum and then motivation can come even quicker. But if we wait for motivation, then a lot of people may not seek that help.
Mm. So your theory is create the momentum first, and then that will fuel the motivation. Is
Yes.
that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
I would add like the momentum, right? So we're taught hustle culture and we're taught this one way to do things. And there's a book on my list that I can't wait to read. It's called the 50% theory. The 50% of what we learn, right? We take all these courses and we do all these things and we hustle this way and we like look at that thought leader and we're like, I'm going to do it like her. And only 50% of everything we read and ingest is actually applicable to us. So, what's that gap? How do we know what the 50% is? What do we take? What do we leave? And that's where emotional intelligence will come in. It's like creating that pause. It's like responding versus reacting, knowing when we're going to break, right? And then creating that pause so that we're not just spewing all over everybody who's in our like 10-meter radius. So creating that pause to say, like, is this for me? Is this not for me? Finding the people who can reflect that to us. If we don't feel comfortable doing it ourselves, if we're still building that self-awareness muscle, just having someone there who can reflect, like, this is what I see. And I know a lot of coaches can do this, being able to reflect what they're seeing. Part of how I was built is I'm able to see, to reflect your genius. So I see the big shiny in the middle and I could say, like, is this, is this true for you? Is this who you are? Curating that even in the mess, but just taking all of these different data points and still holding like that. Yeah, everything is a mess right now. And is this new way true for who I am in my core? Right. And just moving people towards I call it their authentic genius, their unique, peculiar brilliance. We're all weird and right, accepting. And then this is another acceptance piece. We're all like onions, like totally like Shrek. Like we're all like these onions, and bringing those dark pieces and we try to fix, manage, or hide, bringing them into the light, accepting how they are. And because a lot of times those are the things that make us brilliant. Those are the things that light us up. Those are the things in our joy zone. Like I used to be like, God, why do I go on? Like people want to meet me for coffee and I can't just meet for coffee for like a half hour. It has to be like an hour and a half to 2 hours. Like at first I was like,
Seriously.
oh my God. Yeah. Like what's my problem? It turns out I love spending time with people to help them gently see their brilliance and like move at the pace of breathing. That's how I need to operate. Like I operate a very thoughtful, relationship based timing in my business and in my life. Then I was able to get rid of all those mental thoughts about like I'm doing things too slowly. and say, this is part of my peculiar genius, right? So the kryptonite becomes a superpower.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Finance, Fitness, and Finesse. A big thank you to Heidi Esther for sharing her journey and expertise with us. Remember, dimensional wealth is key to building a better future, and with community leaders like Heidi, we're one step closer to a financially empowered society. Be sure to tune in for part 2 next week. If you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you did, help me learn with you and be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Or just follow me on socials linked in the show notes. Stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to build your wealth with wellness. I'm JaeVic, and please don't act woke and be broke. Stay savvy, and if you don't know, now you know. Disclaimer, this podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial or mental health advice. Always seek professional guidance tailored to your personal needs.